Hey, welcome back to Smart Money Mamas Live. I'm your host, Chelsea Brennan, and at Smart Money Mamas, we help moms build thriving relationships with money so that you can create lasting wealth in a way that aligns with your values and lets you live your best life. Today on the show, we're diving deep into how you can save money as a new mama, and I'm so excited because I'm going to be joined by three incredible ladies. We've got Tasha Cochran of One Big Happy Life, mom of two, and an absolute pro at deciding what matters most and building a wealthy life for yourself. Then we've got Kristin Stones from Sense and Purpose, also a mom of two who is amazing at taking advantage of all the ways to save money. And last but certainly not least, Bethany Bayless, co-host of the Motherhood Money Show and a new mom whose son recently turned 1. Happy birthday to Caden. Make sure you hit the subscribe button and click the little bell so you're notified when we release a new episode of the show. And introduce yourself in the comments because we'll have 20 minutes at the end for all of us to answer your questions. Are you ready, mamas? Let's talk money. We've got Bethany coming on here and Kristin Stones, and we're still waiting. Oh, here comes Tasha. We've got Tasha Cochran from One Big Happy Life. How's everybody doing? We're good?
Hey, Chelsea.
So good.
We're so quiet.
Thanks for having us.
I'm so excited to have you all here. Do you want to introduce yourselves? Let's start with Bethany.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. This is so incredibly exciting for me. This is actually my first chat with like an adult, and then especially in the virtual space for content in over a year. So this is really exciting for me. My name is Bethany Bayless. I am a speaker and MC, and then I just had my first son in the pandemic in May of 2020. So it has been an exciting last year, to say the least. And because of this experience, I launched a brand new podcast with a friend of mine, Marissa Lida, who had a baby 4 days before me. So we have the Motherhood and Money Show, where we talk about being new moms in the middle of a pandemic, because it's been an adventure for sure.
Oh, I can't imagine what that was like, and I can't wait to hear more about it. Let's have Kristin tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, everybody. Chelsea, thanks so much for having me. I'm really excited. I have 2 children, as Chelsea said. My kids are a lot older. My daughter will be 16 soon, and my son is 12. But I will say that I think the tips we're going to talk about today really can kind of grow with you as your kids grow up as well. My husband and I had to radically change our lifestyle when we had our come to Jesus moment and realized our finances were in awful trouble, as well as our marriage. And we worked really hard to change everything around. And a lot of that meant really changing the way we spent our money so that we could save money and pay off debt. And that's where Sense and Purpose came from. So I'm excited to help share some tips today.
Amazing. Tasha, we're going to have you introduce yourself as well. Tasha, tell us a little bit about yourself and your family.
Hi, everyone. So excited to be here. So my name is Tasha Cochran, and I am a lawyer and a wealth expert. And through my company, One Big Happy Life, I teach people how to build wealth while also spending for the abundant life that they want to live today. And a little bit more about me and my family. So we are a bit of a non-traditional family. I have quite the spread. I have a 19-year-old. So today we were just actually looking at college apartments for her, and a 5-year-old. So we are looking at kindergartens for him and potentially moving. So I have the experience of being a mom, like 20 years ago and, today. And I will say it's like a very different experience. Yeah.
That is a lot of different things to be looking at. I love the breadth of experience we all have and the different stories we're going to be able to tell today. I can tell this is going to be a lot of fun. And so before the show, we asked the mamas in our audience for questions on this topic, how to save money as a new mom. And one of the things that came up repeatedly was, how do you calm the overwhelm with the costs of having a new baby? Everywhere you look, there's articles and people telling you how expensive a baby is, and people are feeling kind of paralyzed. So what advice do we have from them? Bethany, you're the newest mom here. So how have you dealt with this last year, especially with the pandemic?
Oh my goodness. I can attest to the barrage of all the things that you have to buy, right? Like you have to get all the different expensive, the snoo, the things that like must have for your babies. I remember my pediatrician talking to us once, and she says, you know what? There's a lot of marketing out there. There's a lot of marketing when it comes to new things for babies, and a lot of fear mongering where you have to have this or the worst thing will happen to your baby. And being able to separate that between the actual must-haves for your baby, right? So when we talk about the actual must-haves, you need to have something to feed your baby. That's important. You need somewhere for your baby to sleep. Very important. And then you need something for your baby to wear, including diapers. Those are really the most important must-haves. those are what you need to have your baby. And everything else is a preference. And when it comes to preferences, you know, there's things that like you can, if this is really important to you, maybe take that money set aside that you prepared for this, set that money aside to spend on what are really important to you. And then just like cut out the things that are not important to you. There are things that like I did not care about when it came to having my baby, and I didn't spend a cent on them, or I spent like not as much. Facebook Marketplace is your best friend as a new mom. And then there's some things that I spent a little bit more on, and it's not right or wrong. It's just different. And those are the things that you kind of have to sort through and just say, okay, do we need this for my baby to live? If not, is this a preference that I'm willing to pay for? So that's pretty much what we did when it came to just a lot of marketing out there.
And Tasha, you were in two very different life places and budget places when you had your kids. So can you tell us how you thought about this?
Sure. So with my daughter, Alexis, I actually became pregnant with her when I was 18. I was a single teen mom. I did work full time. I was an active duty Marine, but I was doing it all by myself. And this was before social media was a thing. Thank goodness, because I just didn't have the same sort of like marketing pressures that you have nowadays. And so for me, you know, I was also trying to figure out like, how am I even going to support a child at all? So I knew, like Bethany said, I'm like, okay, so we need a couple of things. We need childcare because I'm going to be working full time and I'm a single mom, a place for the baby to sleep, and a car seat because I'm driving, and baby clothes. And then what am I going to feed this baby? So those were like my big five when I was, you know, 18, pregnant, making less than $24,000 a year. Then by the time with my son, now I'm a lawyer, I'm in, you know, a dual, you know, I'm in a multiple six-figure household. And also I have the experience of not having a lot of money and having to say no to myself about some of the things that I wanted out of necessity. So this time around, and back then I told myself, oh my gosh, when I have my next baby, I'm going to buy that, you know, $2,000 like nursery set with the matching everything and the changing table. And I'm going to buy that $800 glider because I'm going to have the money. And then I had the money for it. And I'm like, why would I ever spend my money on that? So I didn't do those things. Did I buy a lot of luxuries? Yes. So like the swing, right? The $200 baby swing, which was awesome. You know, the silicone nipple bottles that simulate your real nipple. So there's no nipple confusion. I did those things, but just like I think it was Lauren said in the comments, she didn't buy anything. And I actually think that's a good thing. Wait until you feel the need as a mom to buy those things versus buying them preemptively.
I totally agree with this here, especially because our kids just don't like certain things, right? Especially as a new mom, you buy this expensive thing and, you know, your kid rejects it. One of ours was swaddles. We bought like 4 of those Velcro swaddles. Neither of my kids wanted to be swaddled. It was like a nightmare until we unswaddled them. And so they just kind of, we passed them on to another family. And so waiting until you see what your kids need. Kristin, what about you? I know that you mentioned that your relationship was not in a great place and your finances weren't in a great place. How did you handle that anxiety?
Well, these ladies already covered everything, I think. I think one of the most important things is really to be as prepared as you can, of course. And one of the ways I think is helpful to be prepared and understand or get a better feel of what you may actually need, what may be non-negotiables, and what things may not be quite as important would be to talk to family and friends in your life, especially those that you have seen them raise their kids and you know you like their parenting style, or you know you like certain things that you've seen them use, and ask them. Instead of reading just reviews online, talk to somebody that you know, like, and trust, and really get their opinion. Was it helpful? Was it worth the money? Did you need this? And I didn't really have anybody like that in my life because I was the first one out of all of my friends and any family members my age to have kids. So I took the advice of my mom, which of course was a little outdated, but same thing. We just tried to prioritize and determine what were the most important things, and then kind of used asking for gifts for the shower, or used what else little bit was left in our budget to really try and save and find a way to get the things that we felt were going to be the most helpful, but you don't really know. We did get a swing. Thankfully, somebody gave it to us because my daughter hated it. She screamed if we would even walk near that swing. So had we spent the $200 on it, that probably would have been a waste of a huge chunk of money for us at that time. So preparation and research really, I think, is the best thing you can do to try and calm that anxiety. There's always going to be some level of anxiety because you just don't know what to expect.
Absolutely. Bethany and Tasha, what was something that you had for your kids, either bought or gifted, that they just did not use or like?
I think the biggest thing for me is like, this is so silly, but a wipe warmer, like that thing still sits unopened in our box. Cause like, I didn't care if his butt was warm. Like he was going to deal with a full wipe no matter what. So I kind of was like, should I return this? Cause this is, but I also didn't do the swing. I just Facebook Marketplace again. I just got things from there. And if it was only $15, like thankfully that was it. And he just wasn't into the swing at all.
Yeah. So thankfully I had pretty good luck. I did buy a lot of stuff this second time around, but it was really useful. And those baby wipe warmers, they always end up on the don't buy this, but I swear by them. Both of my kids like warm butts, okay? Because they will go back to sleep so much faster. But oh my gosh, if I had to pick one thing, probably the playpen, because Reeves was so huge. He was a 10-pound baby. And so the playpen just like, it didn't hold him. So that's one thing that we just really just didn't even use.
We never used ours either, except for like maybe sleeping at my like in-laws or my parents' house. Like they sometimes slept in the playpen, but mostly we didn't use it. But Kristin also brought up, asking advice from your friends. And this is a question that got submitted before the live was, what was the best motherhood advice you were given before you became a mom? Anyone can jump in.
I just want to be honest and say I didn't have any good advice. Like, like 18-year-old me, I only had my mom and, I didn't ask her for mom advice. And some of us have those kinds of moms where you're not going to ask your mom for parenting advice. And so I just kind of like figured it out on my own. And I kind of think that was a really like a nice thing to just be able to not have expectations, to not have other people telling me what to do, and to just like intuitively parent my child. It worked out well. She's, functional. So I mean,
she's awesome.
She is. She
I can attest to that.
Yes. I should have her come wave and say hi. She's awesome.
She should.
And piggybacking off of what Tasha said, I had a friend. It was so funny on my Facebook. A memory popped up today is actually my son's due date, and he came 2 weeks early. And so I did this post of like, oh, it's his due date. Thank you for coming early. It's been 2 weeks. This is the best. And in that, I saw a comment that I had forgotten about. And it was actually somebody gave me the advice of the first 2 weeks is just a crash course on parenting. Like you don't have to really have anything figured out. And then the first 2 weeks, you're going to find a rhythm. You're going to find what works, what doesn't work. If they, go back to sleep faster because their butts are warmer, it's perfect. And all of those things. And so just having that crash course, and like Tasha said, just you have to figure out your kid. You have to figure out what they like. And, they're going to be super good at some things and maybe not great at other things. And it's hard to not compare them to other babies and see like, oh my gosh, their kid is sleeping through the night at 2 weeks. How wonderful for them. And in actuality, you have to figure it out so much on your own, and people can give you advice, but the best advice is probably just like, you do you, and you're going to figure it out, and you're going to do great, and you're going to have awesome kids like Tasha. I have met her daughter, and she's awesome.
Alexis is amazing. And so the biggest piece of advice I actually got was not about like the first couple months. It was just with parenting and actually with the baby. I had a colleague at work tell me, don't make any major life decisions in the first 6 months after you have a baby. Not about your work, not about where you're going to live. Like just, if you were going to go back to work after maternity leave, go back to work after. You like let your brain kind of settle into your new life before you make any changes, which was such a huge thing because so much is changing, and you think you can fix it sometimes by just like, well, maybe if I didn't have this job, or maybe if I didn't live here, maybe like our relationship feels strained right now, and just giving it the time to kind of settle out. Which begs the question too of, We've talked a lot about the stuff that our kids get, but what do we have to do with our personal finances before we have kids to put us in a little bit of a more secure space? Kristin, do you want to start us off?
Save every single dime you can save is really the best advice. We didn't do that in any way, shape, or form. We were completely unprepared. We had just moved into a house about a couple months before, so everything was a shambles. Really, again, not to repeat myself, but do your research, prepare as much as you possibly can. I think really sitting down and having an extra in-depth budget meeting, goals meeting, parental planning meeting with your spouse or partner if you have one. And if not, maybe just somebody that you really trust in your life that can kind of help you navigate some of this, and really just lay out, what are you going to need? What are the costs that you think you're going to incur? Like Tasha said, are you going to need childcare? If so, take some time and try to do some research ahead of time. Daycare isn't really a place you want to bargain shop. You want to make sure that your child is well taken care of. So, you need to make sure that you're prepared, because you can really have sticker shock once you call around and you find out how much a good quality daycare is actually going to cost you. But really take a look at your budget. Take a look at your current savings rate. And are you able to cut certain expenses that you have now that maybe won't be quite as valuable to you once you have a child here? And I think really just projecting out as much as you can what you're going to need. If you're taking off work, can you replace that income? Do you have some type of short-term disability to give you some type of income while you are out? How long can you take maternity leave for? I mean, I'll just go the whole time. So I'm going to pass to somebody else.
Well, let's talk about maternity leave then. So Tasha, you were in the military. What did maternity leave look like in the military?
So in the military, I got 6 weeks of paid maternity leave, which in the US is sweet, right? Because so many employers
Sadly,
don't offer that at all. I know.
So long.
Whereas when I tell, my Canadians or my people who live in the UK, and they're like, you only got 6 weeks, you poor thing, kind of patting me on my head, poor thing.
We give puppies longer than that.
Right? 12 weeks before they have to go to their forever home.
Exactly.
So, going back to the expenses thing, I knew, again, because I was a single mom, that I was going to have to start paying for daycare. And so what I did, that's the budgeting method that we teach now, which is the 1-year spending plan. It actually came about because guess what? It takes 9 months to make a baby, and then 6 weeks of maternity leave. And then 6 weeks later, then I've got a regular budget, my post-baby budget. What does that make? 12 months. So I actually created my first 1-year spending plan when I found out that, I was pregnant and I was going to be a single mom. I said, okay, I've got 12 months to figure this stuff out and figure out how I'm going to be able to afford this baby once the baby is here. And so I just put together my budget, figuring daycare was going to be the most expensive part. But then I was also able to plan, okay, this month is the month I'll be able to buy my crib. And this month is the month that I'll be able to buy a car seat, because I could see my whole year at once. Now, this time around, because I make more money, I just put together my baby budget. So I decided all the things I wanted to have. I did some research on which ones I wanted to have. So I knew exactly how much it was all going to cost. So I put that money aside. And also another important cost to look at is how much it's actually going to cost you to deliver that baby. For some people, it can be very expensive.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And so Bethany, you had a baby during the pandemic. And so what were you doing for work before you had your baby? What did your maternity leave look like?
This is such a fun story because, there's a saying that's plan for things, and then the universe will decide what it actually wants to do. And so there were certain aspects that we planned for. So we were thankful that we were able to plan for a baby. We had known that we had wanted to have a baby. My husband and I were married 5 years before we decided, let's do this. And so we looked at what I was doing. So I'm actually, since I'm a public speaker and MC, a lot of my work is not consistent. There's days that I have a lot of money coming in, and then there's other times that maybe I'm not making as much money. So we were kind of in this fluctuating times of feast or famine, and kind of figuring out what that would look like. And so when we realized we were going to be having a baby, we already knew that my work would take a significant back seat to the baby. And so I knew I wasn't going to be traveling as much. I knew I wasn't going to be able to do as much work. And so I had already postured myself to try to start making more money at home. But what really was the deciding factor was my husband got another job that allowed for me to take my work to take a back seat. And so that was really helpful for us, and kind of all right, now we can do this. Now we know we're going to be financially ready. So when the pandemic hit, it was a big bummer for people who go to conferences and that's how they make money. because there were no conferences, and actually a lot of my work, all of it had just fell through, and several of the conferences are canceled now. Like they don't even exist anymore. The ones that I was scheduled to speak at, they had to close, and it's really unfortunate. And so thankfully we had put a money aside to be able to, have almost like an extended maternity leave for me if it was a choice. And it served us so well when the pandemic hit. And I still am not back at work. Like I'm still not making the money I used to. But I'm really grateful that we kind of had a semblance of a plan when, the craziest stuff happens in this world.
Well, hopefully we start seeing more of these conferences come back. I know later this year, it seems like a couple of them are going to try. We're going to try in the fall, but fingers crossed for that. Kristin, what about you? How long was your leave?
My leave was longer by my own devious plan. I kind of I knew I didn't want to come back to work. My dream was always to be a stay-at-home mom, but our finances just would not allow that to happen. I had a really good job. I didn't want to leave. And then once that baby came, I just knew I couldn't go back. Daycare was pretty much way more than our mortgage at that point because our mortgage was very affordable at that time. And I just knew if we, prayed a lot and really worked hard to stretch our dollar as far as possible, that somehow by the grace of God, we could make it work. So I took my short-term disability leave. I told my employer the whole time, I assured them I was coming back, and I didn't come back. At the end, I let them know and I didn't come back. And I felt terrible. I felt really bad, but my boss ended up telling me that she knew the whole time there was no way I was coming back. So I guess they had somebody already training and they were fine with it, but I just could not leave that little baby. And my short-term disability was, I think it was like, 66.6 repeating % of my salary is what I got. And I squirreled it all away as much as we could. And I never went back. And then once the baby was a couple months old, I started bartending for a couple years. It was not ideal. My husband went third shift. I never slept. I didn't sleep for like 3 years straight. But we made it work. We figured it out.
And that's a great point about maternity leave. I know that a lot of employers know that people change their minds after they have a baby. And so having a conversation too of like, hey, I really intend to come back to work, but if I change my mind mid-maternity leave, what do you want me to do? Sometimes companies are actually okay. They're actually better off knowing so they have time to hire somebody else and they'll continue to pay. So just be clear beforehand. Tell them you're coming back if that's your intention before you have your baby, but it gives you options. I know at my job, we actually had a very honest conversation with the HR rep who was like, listen, replacing you guys is really hard. And like, I know you want to come back, but if you don't, just tell us, like, we'll pay you through leave, but we just want as much time as possible to find a replacement. And so sometimes you have to keep it quiet, but just as a way to like, sometimes just like letting them know what your options are kind of can help as well.
Yeah, so let's also talk about the fact that they have to keep paying you. Like, even if you say midway through, like, I'm not sure that I'm going to come back, they definitely can't fire you then, right? Because it'll be very, very obvious. No, illegal. But I want to just say, because both Bethany and Kristin did not go back to work. So I went back to work after both of my children. So when I had my son, I was working at a law firm and they had 12 weeks of paid maternity leave. So I feel extra lucky that I was working for 2 employers that offered paid maternity leave. And I did go back to work. After my son, it was hard because we struggled to conceive him. It took us 4 years to conceive our son. And I almost didn't go back because I'm like, well, what if this is my last baby? And so I know that there are probably other mothers out there who staying home is not an option for them. And so, I just want to validate also that choice of like, yeah, it's still going to be hard, even if you decide to go back to work. And for some moms, it's also not hard. So if that's you, that's okay too. But I went back to work and I really want to lean into that idea of not making any decisions, like life-changing decisions for the first 6 months, because it was hard at first, but I definitely got used to it. And especially I had a flexible job where I could work from home 2 to 3 days a week, and I had a nanny. So when I worked from home, then it was like the best of both worlds because I could still do work that I loved, but see my son all the time and still make money.
I'm so glad you jumped in with this because as you guys know, but I realize I haven't mentioned in this episode, I'm the breadwinner in our family, right? My husband is a stay-at-home dad. So not going back to work after maternity leave was not an option in our house. And it was actually hard. So I got 16 weeks paid at my job, which was amazing. It was incredible. But I had postpartum depression that didn't hit until my kid was 6 months old. So everything felt fine when I first went back and everything was okay. And then it got really, really hard. And so stay aware that that can happen too, and make sure that the people in your lives are looking out for it. I was unaware that postpartum can hit in the whole first year and not just like in the weeks after you have your baby. But I was glad I went back. It provided like some of my normalcy in my life and my own challenges. And then after our second kid, I started Smart Money Mama. So I was definitely working quite a bit after I had my second as well. So validating that is absolutely true. But we mentioned, finding ways to save money as much as possible. Bethany saving up for, an entrepreneur maternity leave, and Kristin looking to be a stay-at-home mom. What are some of your guys' favorite ways just in your day-to-day life to save money? And maybe we can start with Bethany.
This is a really great question because I feel like this is something we constantly evaluate in every season of our lives. It's something that maybe you're saving money here one day and then you're saving money in a different place. And so I would say right now where we are kind of where in our lives, we're getting back to the basics when it comes to budgeting, of just knowing what's coming in and what's going out. And I can just tell you, I will admit it to all of us. Pandemic hit me hard when it came to impulse spending. I do not want to go look on Amazon to see how much I have spent this year year alone. There's an option. You can see how much you've spent over your lifetime on Amazon. I don't want to see it. I don't want to, because it's hard. It's really hard. And so one of the things we're reining back that impulse spending. And a lot of that is kind of just sitting down and really being stringent with what it is that comes in and what's going out. And so I really loved I do cash envelopes. That's something that we really love doing. And so when it comes to the impulse spending, it's harder with cash envelopes now that Amazon isn't cash-based. I'm sorry, it was never cash-based. And so I think that's the biggest thing is my impulse spending is something that's really been an issue. And so it's wonderful when you're like, wow, let's not impulse spend on this when you see how much of a hit that's taking to your bank account. And then when it comes to like things like our menu and shopping, I try to write out our menu every single week so that I can go to the grocery store, use my cash envelopes, and then not have that impulse spending when it comes to spending, just going to the grocery store and seeing all the things that I want and all the wonderful options that I can eat tonight, especially when I was a nursing mom. Oreos were like a good go-to, and chips and all that stuff. And it really took a hit on our budget. So just kind of seeing what's going in, what's going out, and going back to the basics really served us really well when it came to these things that we now have to provide for our son that's here.
Absolutely. We actually just started using this app called Cube. I don't know if you guys have heard of it, but basically it's like a cash envelope bank. And so to turn on your debit card, you have to like open the cube that you're spending. And so we took like our most overspending accounts and we like moved everything into Cube banking. And it has been amazing of like, you have to click to open it. Even if you're doing an Amazon thing, like you can pre-approve Amazon is going to make a purchase and you have to say where it's coming from, but then it immediately updates your account about how much is in there. And so that's like been our way. Cash envelopes I could never keep up with, but this is like enough that like day to day I can see it. Kristin, what about you? What were some of the ways you save money to become a stay-at-home mom?
Oh, well, like Bethany said, I'm a foodie, so I love to cook. I love to go to the grocery store and buy everything. I'm always hungry, so never ever shop hungry. There's scientific research that shows you actually spend more money when you're shopping, period, not even just on groceries, just any shopping. So I always have snacks with me, even at my desk if I'm shopping online. That helps a lot. I now order my groceries online, which has made a huge difference because, like I said, I cannot control myself in a grocery store. So ordering online along with meal planning, unfortunately, ordering online, that wasn't an option when I had my children. If so, that would have been awesome. We had switched to shopping at Aldi back then, and I did shop at Aldi until recently. I buy almost all generics except for Pop-Tarts. Never buy generic Pop-Tarts. Otherwise, I buy almost all generics, and that saves us a lot of money, especially right now when we're really seeing the costs of everything start to creep up. Your food bill, it's going to continually get more expensive. So if there are some foods that you don't mind, I know some people are really loyal to brands, but if you're not, try swapping out for generics. It's a big difference. And back then, we just had to really change our lifestyle. I wasn't buying the clothes that I was buying before I had kids because I couldn't fit in them. And I just couldn't afford them anymore. I wasn't buying the $100 plus nice pair of boots to wear out every weekend. Like, I just wasn't doing that stuff. So when I had my daughter, I was 25. And before then, we were still out with our friends all the time, hanging out, celebrating birthdays. So just cutting all of that out saved us a lot of money. And cooking at home, everything combined, you know, those little things, they may not feel like a lot in the moment, but they truly do add up.
Absolutely. And I love that both you and Bethany brought up those impulses, right? When we think about trying to like align our spending with our values and what we want, understanding what our spending triggers are is such a huge part of that, right? To make sure that we're not getting sucked into, you know, what happens in the day to day. Tasha, how do you and Joseph save money?
So I will say just from the beginning, like our number one thing is to focus on making more money so that we don't have to say no to ourselves as much, right? Having said that, a new baby with like daycare costs, and we had a nanny, very expensive. So, you know, we look at some of the bigger overarching ways to save. So paying attention to like what our healthcare costs are looking like, taking advantage of things like health savings accounts and dependent care flexible spending accounts and medical, you know, flexible spending accounts if you also have access to that, because we're talking about hundreds or thousands of dollars saved in taxes year over year, which is huge. But then the next thing that we do is we look at, okay, what are our big budget busters? Where are the things, where are the areas of opportunity that we can tweak and, you know, reduce our spending without reducing our enjoyment, right? And so for us, that place is our groceries by far, because we're not big shoppers. We don't go out. If we do go out, it's going out to eat, and a family of four, you're looking at $100+ each time you go out to eat. Even Chick-fil-A is like $65 each time. So you go to Chick-fil-A 3 times a week, you're looking at over $150. And that's $600 a month just at Chick-fil-A, and you don't even feel like you did anything fancy. So meal prep is huge. And for me, I love going to Costco and buying in bulk, because you get those bulk prices and it saves you time having to look for coupons and things like that. And then I just got really good at planning different meals using the same Costco ingredients. Like, how many different ways can you use up ground turkey, red bell peppers, and ketchup? Like, there are lots of different ways.
Feels like an episode of Chopped. Like, now my brain is like, how can I? What am I going to go make?
And the meal prep is masterful. And once you get that taken care of, you just knock it out all at once. And then you don't have to think about food all week. You don't have to worry about if you're tired and, oh, I just feel like eating out. You just make foods that are delicious, that you love. But I still like, absolutely, number one, grow your income so that you can have everything that you want without having to, you know, really watch every single penny. And that takes time.
Absolutely. And we focus on that as well, and making sure that you're prioritizing the things that matter to you, right? Not completely scrimping on absolutely everything for the sake of just, you know, spending more money on baby things or whatever you need, right? And so one of the things too, I don't remember if it's Super Chef or superfood.com, that you can enter all the food that you have in your house, and it will pull up recipes that like have those ingredients. And so like, especially when you're getting down to like the end of your pantry and you don't want to waste food, it's like one of our favorite things to be like, ooh, what could I make with these random, you know, chopped ingredients, as Bethany said. So mamas, we're going to be opening up for questions from the audience in a second. So guys, start dropping your questions in the chat. But before we do, what is each of your biggest pieces of advice for new and expecting mamas? And let's start with Bethany.
This is such a big question. I could go so many different ways with this. I think one of the biggest things is look for help where help is provided. And so I didn't know what to expect when I became a mom. And I know that like my situation is incredibly unique. Becoming a mom in a pandemic, it was really hard. Like I'm getting emotional thinking about it right now, because it is a hard thing to be a new mom. Like the world is just barraging you with so many different fears and concerns and all these things. And then you're trying to figure it all out. And it can just be a really hard, vulnerable place. And so one of the biggest things for me, I actually started going to counseling when I was a new mom. With a pandemic happening, with all of the hormones and just going through hormone hell, it's one of those things that it was a very difficult time for my mental health. And I know we've all had pandemic experiences. We all had new mom experiences, and putting those things together was probably one of the hardest things that I've ever done in my life. And so look for help where help is provided. Look for help. I had a a wonderful mother. I have a wonderful mother-in-law, and I set up days of the week for either my mom to come here to watch the baby, or for me to go to my mother-in-law's to drop off the baby, go to the store, maybe do, in the middle of a pandemic with my mask in Target was kind of like my self-care and just avoiding the dollar section for my impulse spending, but still just tap into those resources and tap into the people that love you, and also admit this is hard. This is really, really hard. And ask for help, or just look for that help where it's provided. And so I'm a big advocate of mental health. I'm a big advocate of counseling and therapy. It really, really helped me in probably one of the most difficult times of my life. And so I think that's my biggest advice for people is admit that it's hard, and then look for that help where you can.
That's fantastic advice. And you and all the pandemic moms are so strong. Getting through this when we didn't have, play groups and these times to go meet up with other moms in an open way.
What are play groups? What are those? Are these
those are a thing. Yes.
Tell me more.
This was the only way we met new moms, right? And so I was a working mom, so it was really hard, but there was a board in our local area where it's I remember going to other women's houses and meeting up with other kids whose kids were in the same 6-month range and hanging out with them. And it was one of the only ways that I figured out that, I wasn't the only one lost and I wasn't the only one overwhelmed. And so not having that, all the hugs, Bethany. And Kaden is adorable and amazing.
And I just add a little plug of, it's not an ad or anything. I actually met moms through an app called Peanut, which is it's like Tinder for moms, where you just swipe right or left on the kind of mom friends that you want to have. No shame if, you're just maybe not the right mom friend, you can just swipe up or down. But I met some really wonderful, amazing women through this app that really helped me when it came to being a new mom. And so there's technology out there, play groups and Tinders for moms.
Amazing. Kristin, what advice do you have?
Can you have used that app if your kids are 15?
Yes. I'll give you a link.
I'll be downloading that. I agree with Bethany. That was one of the hardest things for me. We had very, very little help. Both of my children had severe colic. Both of them. Usually you get one and then the other one's great. We had two, and the second was even worse than the first. So all of our parents, in-laws, everybody we knew worked full time, no flexibility. We had very little help. We were always doing single parent mode on opposite shifts. And when somebody did offer to help, my ego didn't allow me to accept that. I'm a control freak. I'm completely type A, and I just wanted to show everybody, or maybe just myself, that I could do it, I could handle it. So sorry to chime in on that, Bethany, but I think that's really great advice. If I could do it over again, I'd take all the help. My one piece of advice would probably be, and I don't want to be negative, but don't ever get too comfortable with any stage of your child's growth. So for example, the first 2 weeks, my daughter was the perfect baby. She slept all the time. She ate perfect. I mean, it was perfect. And then all of a sudden week 3 hit and the colic comes out of nowhere. She still hasn't slept since she was 3 weeks old. It never stays the same. As soon as you get used to something, if you get too comfortable, if you get too set in your own routines or too set in your own schedule, your child is going to change and start doing something completely different. And not that it's a problem, but if you are struggling with little help, if you are struggling with mental health stuff, if you are somebody that really needs the structure and the schedule, it can be very discouraging and very disheartening when every time you feel like you're finally getting used to something, or you feel like you're finally getting sleep, boom, the next day, everything's completely different. So just try to go with the flow as much as you possibly can, and understand that your child is going to be constantly growing and changing, and probably most days will not remain the same.
That was another piece of advice I got, that everything is a phase, the good stuff and the bad stuff. Don't expect it to ever just stay consistent. Tasha, what about you?
So I definitely co-sign on the get help. Now, unfortunately, I have never lived in a place where that help came from family members or friends, because again, I had just joined the military. I just got to Quantico. So my family was in New York. And then when we had our son, we were in Maryland. So that meant paying for help. And that's okay too. Like, it is okay to save on your grocery budget so you could spend money, but to send your laundry to wash and fold so you don't have to spend 15 hours a week washing clothing and folding it. Okay. But so just co-signing there. So, but my bit of advice is, like, I've got two. One, sleep when your baby sleeps is just phenomenal advice. And not enough people do that. When your kid sleeps, that's not time to clean the house. You go to sleep. Okay. Because if you that's the only way to get enough sleep, because you're not going to, for me, Reeves was also a non-sleeper. So my little one. And so the only way that I could function as an adult was to also take naps during the day because my nighttime sleep was so broken up. So you don't need to get it all done. Try to pay for help to help get stuff done. Just because you're home with baby doesn't mean your husband or your partner doesn't help around the house too. They can come home and do laundry, so they can help. And then my second piece, though, is to just really try to enjoy the whole thing, just because I have a 19-year-old and I really see just how quickly the time passes and how those memories fade. And it's been a blessing to have, at that time, a 14-year-old and an infant, because I truly cherish every single moment, every single little change, every new thing that my son does in a way that I took for granted with my daughter, because it felt like 18 years felt like forever. And then they really passed by so quickly. Mm-hmm. So just really try to be present in the moment, enjoy it. Don't put so much pressure on yourself to be perfect. There's no such thing as being a perfect parent, and just try to enjoy it.
That advice about how fast it gets. My son is about a little over 5, my oldest. And last year at one point, one of my friends who has a kid a similar age was like, I just realized that we're a quarter of the way to 18. And I was like, why would you phrase it like that? I have to think about the fact that we're 25% of the way through to 18. It goes really, really fast. And so Ellie K asked, did any of you have health issues with your sick babies? I think we were all pretty lucky.
Thankfully. Yeah.
So I actually had a few things.
Okay.
I was really blessed in some areas. So like Caden's always been a really great sleeper. Like that's kind of like our only claim to fame when it comes to him. And thank goodness, because he had a lot of other little issues that we had to take care of. We went to a lot of doctors' offices throughout Los Angeles of just kind of like tiny little things here and there. They just kind of had to nip all of these little areas. And so my son had a helmet. He had flat head on one side of his head because he had called torticollis in his neck when he was born. And so that was one thing that I struggled with mom guilt over, because I'm like, was it my fault that he had to have this? And since I've had a baby, I'm very emotional. So if you haven't, you made me cry again, Tasha, just now. But so it was kind of one of those things. He had to have a helmet. And then recently, Caden also got COVID. That was a really big thing for us. That was really hard. We had to take him to Children's Hospital of Los Angeles to take him to the emergency room so he could just get a little help with his lungs and breathing because he was having a hard time. And after that, strange silver lining was that because he tested positive for COVID, we went back to Children's Hospital Los Angeles because he had to get a tumor removed from his eyebrow. And so if you look at pictures of him now, he has a little bit, thankfully it was benign, but man, there's a lot of hard stuff that we take it and we're resilient and we can do it. And he's such a resilient little baby. It was just, there's been a lot of different things, but the silver lining was he didn't have to get tested for COVID when we went in for surgery.
Because he'd had COVID.
Was nice. He had it.
Yeah.
And so he had the positive test, and because they still shove it up his nose when it comes to all of that. But,
well, at least you didn't have to do that again. Yeah.
But I mean, just little things here and there have just been, they've been annoying, but thankfully, like, we have it really good. Like, all of those things were a huge blessing. Like, he didn't have more issues when it came to them testing that tumor. He didn't have to have, he has a perfectly round head now. It's beautiful. Everyone comments on how round his head is, because it's just, the helmet did its job really, really well. But those are some of the health issues we had to deal with.
Well, I'm glad he's doing better now. COVID must have been a very scary thing. And it doesn't really end when these little things come up. My 3-year-old gave my 5-year-old a concussion last night. They're not currently home. They're at my in-laws, so I got a call at 9:00 that Henry has a concussion because George hit him with a glass popcorn bowl. And, that's just things happen and they're going to be okay. He'll be fine. But yeah, these things come up. And that also comes back to money too, of making sure we're planning for medical expenses. And that like one of the things that we know surprises a lot of moms is that your baby gets their own deductible after they're born. And so if your kid ends up in the NICU or just really has like these kind of smaller things happen, you have to have a budget for those expenses as well. All right, we have a few other questions in the comments. Evelyn says, my husband and I struggle hiring someone to watch our 3 girls. It's just so hard to trust a stranger. How did you guys handle, hiring the first people to watch your kids?
We didn't. We have still at 15 and 12 never had anybody that wasn't family watch our kids. Now that to say we've never had anybody actually babysit other than a night here and there. So we don't get out much. But one thing that I would have done had we really needed to get some help and didn't have any other options would probably be to try and find somebody in my life that maybe had the same type of needs, and maybe we could swap if schedules allowed. Maybe I could help them out and watch their kids a couple times, and then they could help me out and watch mine. Or if they don't have children, maybe if there's someone that you do trust and there's someone willing to watch your children, maybe there's something else that you could give them to compensate for them helping you out with your children. I always tell people, try to make sure it's even so that one person isn't feeling slighted and feeling like they're giving a lot more and the other is taking. So if you're going to swap, maybe you know how to cut hair. Maybe you could cut their hair for them, or maybe you could give them a massage or do their nails, bake them a cake. I mean, there's so many things that you probably don't even realize that you could offer somebody else that would be of value to them. And that would just be one way to get some help with somebody that you trust instead of some rando.
Yeah, don't leave your kid with some rando.
Well, speaking as someone who has left my kids with many, many randos.
Tasha is an expert on this.
Right, so. Yes. So my daughter Alexis went to daycare when she was 6 weeks old. And I really didn't have a choice, right? Mm-hmm. So I was lucky enough that I just interviewed a lot of places, right? So that's what you do. You're going to go with your gut, go with your mama gut. And as you interview people and you get to know them and you like spend time in the centers, you watch how the teachers interact with the kids, that will give you a vibe for whether or not it's a good fit for your child. So with Alexis, we put her in a home care provider that was like, certified by the state and all of that. So fully on the up and up. And it was the best experience because her name was Janet and she truly treated those children like she was grandma and these are their kids. And she would like even cook us dinner. So we would like take home like pans of manicotti because she was Italian. And we would go on vacation together, but it took a while for that relationship to build to that level, but it was the best experience. And then it was time for her to move on to pre-K. And so then she went to a regular sort of like a preschool. And so again, it's just checking out those preschools and seeing which ones have the right vibe, which ones make you feel comfortable. I think was it Bethany or Kristin? I don't know, that was talking about you don't really want to skimp on childcare. This is one of those places where you're going to pay money for probably the best places that you want. Mm-hmm. And then lastly, we did with Reeves a nanny. And so we had nanny cams everywhere. And we also she came highly recommended. So, so there was that. And we just watched her. Like I would just check in on her. There were cameras all over the house. So periodically I'm just checking in. Is she doing what she's supposed to be doing? Is everything looking good? And eventually you start to trust that person and they become like part of the family. So our nanny, actually, she passed away from an aneurysm suddenly. And it was devastating for our whole family. Reeves was 2 years old and she was like family. So they start off as randos, but then you get to know them. They love your children. You can see that they love your children. And honestly, they're better at kids than you are because it's their whole job. Like, let's not forget that these people are professionals. It is their job to teach kids, to raise them well, to understand how to speak to them according to where they are in their development that we as parents just have no idea about. So I think that not enough credit is given to the people whose expertise is child rearing, which is not parents.
Absolutely. And Kate's comment here that when you find someone who deeply knows and loves your child, it's really wonderful. It is a beautiful thing for your kid to have more adults in their lives that know them and care about them and are watching out for them. And so that's an amazing thing. Bethany, it looked like you were going to jump in there.
Well, and I love this idea that Tasha is talking about because, I recently was talking to a friend who is considering putting her son in daycare, and it just kills her that she has to do this. And it's hard because, you want to be a stay-at-home mom. There's this kind of like this tension in society of like women need to do everything. They need to do it all, and they need to do it great, and they need to do it perfect, and they need to do it now. Like there's this pressure in society that we need to be both 100% present at work and 100% present at home and doing all at the same time and juggling all of those hats when it's incredibly unrealistic. And when it comes to being a stay-at-home mom versus maybe 1-2 days in daycare, that might even be better for the child. And so ultimately, at the end of the day, we have to see who's the most important person here. That's our children, and we want what's best for them. And daycare could be an incredible option. I have not put my son in daycare, but just think about all the games they're going to play with him that I do a terrible job at doing. My Montessori toys, not the best at me doing activities with him whilst I am working in the other room.
Can I just piggyback just really quick to say, okay, so number one, I hate imaginative play. Okay, Reeves, it's all up in and the battling, and I really don't like that. So I'm glad that Joseph is into it. But even when we had our nanny, when Reeves was 2 years old, he knew all his letters, he knew the alphabet, he was counting. And I'm like, I think he needs a little bit more than just being here with a nanny. So we had a nanny, and he was in preschool 3 hours a day. So the nanny would come in the morning, she would drop him off at preschool, she would do other things around the house, and then she would pick him up. It was 3 days a week. So, and that's what he needed, and he fully thrived. And thankfully, we actually did that because when our nanny passed, he went there full time and he already knew the teachers and everything. And in fact, one of his teachers was so close to the family that her daughter, who is a teacher, is also Reeves' summer nanny. So It's like you build these relationships.
And we had that too. So my husband's a stay-at-home dad, and with our youngest, he just felt like he needed something else. And so we thought about sending him to Montessori 3 days a week. Frankly, we signed the paperwork to sign him up the week before everything closed in Connecticut for COVID. So he never actually got to go, but he's starting preschool in the fall. And we cannot wait for him to have that interaction. So you can find really amazing people. And if you're looking for more daycare providers, if there's a college in your area, we've had a lot of luck posting in those groups, looking for people older, a little bit older, especially if your kids are young, who are willing to watch your kids, and you can interview them, find people that fit. And then things like care.com that'll do full background checks and help you find really good babysitters. You are going to pay for it, right? Like we talked about, but there is that option. And so we all also have different work experiences. And so Stephanie wanted to know, do you have any advice for thinking about going back to work, whether, how, when, where, part-time, full-time, etc.? I'm currently part-time, but wondering if or when I go full-time. So Stephanie, we've already touched on that. Tasha was full-time and went back both times. I was full-time, went back the first time, and then became an entrepreneur the second time. Kristin became a stay-at-home mom, and Bethany is an entrepreneur going back into entrepreneurship. And so we all have different perspectives. Bethany, how are you thinking about getting back out there with conferences as the world opens back up?
This is a really, so many great questions that you are throwing my way because I just don't have a lot of answers for them. It is something though that I am itching at, right? I took more time off than I intended to. And as an entrepreneur, that hustle is always there in the back of your mind. I felt just for the first 9 months of Kaden being alive, I'm like, I need to hustle. I need to make money. I need to figure this out. I need to. And then just when the pandemic was here, it was like giving myself that permission of it's okay not to hustle right now. It's okay to not have to keep going. And so I'm feeling that hustle again. I'm feeling it come back. And the really crazy thing is there are so many ways to make money these days. It's beautiful. And so, you know what? I don't know if I'm going to go back to conferences. It's been an amazing part of my life. I love it. As you might see, I have a bold, bright personality about me. That's who I am. But I'm also kind of transitioning into some other things. And so I am, this is weird to come out of my mouth. I'm an artist. My album's
Guys, Bethany
dropping. No, I'm
makes
just
the
kidding.
cutest stickers. The
Oh my
cutest
gosh,
stickers
thank
you've
you.
ever seen.
I need stickers. Let's talk.
Oh my gosh, can we please?
Yes.
I would love that. And so it's this weird thing of like, I never considered myself an artist. Like it's something that I look back now, my mom brought over a ton of junk. I mean, boxes from my childhood that I still have to go through. And in these, I'm starting to like pull out like all of my artwork of when I was a little girl. And I had like Bethany's portfolio and like looking at all these, I'm like, I've always been an artist. Like that's kind of been who I am. And so I feel like this year's been a big year of self-discovery and figuring out what it is. And now I'm starting to sell stickers on the internet to strangers. And it's like, what is this? And so I think learning more about myself, again, going back to the therapy, best thing I could have ever done to help me, that creativity is coming back. And then being creative about making money and being creative of how to make money from home. Because I don't know if you can see it. This is my office. That's my son's playroom. And so being able to do both and having that pressure, but also kind of being creative, just maybe find new ways to make money. Maybe it's something you've never done before. Maybe it's something you've always wanted to do. And just looking at those dreams that you might have had that you forgot about and being able to find ways to make money and get that hustle back. And so that's a really long story to say I'm working on it. And it's been really cool.
Oh, guys, and we're going to link Bethany's stickers in the description of this video when we get off. But Kristin, you talked about wanting to become a stay-at-home mom, but at some point you started your blog and you started your online business. So when did you make that decision?
I did. So actually, after I had my second child, I went back to work full time, like a normal 9-to-5 desk job. It was really hard. It's not something I wanted to do. That I always had an entrepreneurial spirit. So desk jobs kind of crushed my soul day by day. But the thing is, nobody can really tell you what's right for you. You have to be able to back to the original question. You know what's right for you, what's right for your child, what's right for your finances, what works with your spouse, what doesn't put a strain on your relationship. So there really isn't a right time when you should transition back to work or away from work or work more, work less. I think along with what Bethany said, if you do feel that pull to be at home, and like I mentioned, I apologize if you see the lighting change. Apparently I'm getting a crazy thunderstorm now, so it got really dark in here and I hope you don't hear it. But if you do feel that pull to stay home and be close to your child, you can monetize literally anything. We live in such a cool era where you can seriously put anything on the internet in some type of way and make money for it. It takes the persistence. It takes a lot of hard work. But if it's something that's truly important to you, you can absolutely do that. And aside from that, Chelsea, back to your original question, as I said, I was always entrepreneurial. It took me a long time to really figure out what that feeling was inside of me that made me want to jam scissors in my eyeballs every day I went to a real desk job. And I was always a really good worker. I had a good work ethic. I was always good at my jobs, but I hated them all. So once I realized what it was, I tried everything to have my own thing. First women go through all the MLMs, and then I started making decorated sugar cookies and people wanted to buy those, and it just kind of evolved. And I had a blog a couple years ago about health and wellness, and then one day I decided I hated working out and I wanted to only eat junk food all day, so I stopped that blog because it felt a little fake. And then when we kind of had our own financial journey, awakening, what have you, I just felt as though we had received so many blessings throughout our journey to improve our finances and pay off debt that it kind of, not to sound cheesy, it felt like I was being called to share this experience with other women, because for a long time I felt like we had no hope and we were stuck where we were. And once we climbed out, I just really wanted other women to understand that they're not stuck either, and they do have the power to take back control of their own finances. And it just kind of evolved.
Absolutely. Tasha, when did you make the decision to go from your full-time lawyer job to running your own business?
So gradually, it definitely came from that feeling of not wanting to go back to work, and also not feeling like I could stay home and still hit all of my financial and life goals, right? My professional goals. So I actually started making money online when I was on that 12-week maternity leave. I started doing TaskRabbit for like $10 an hour. So I have a law degree from Yale Law School, and I'm like, all right, can I do TaskRabbit at $10 an hour? And I'm like, no, this is too much work for $10 an hour. And then they tried to give me a raise because clearly I was like super overqualified. But I went back to work. And I will say, just for those people who are not entrepreneurial minded, I'd love to give some tips about, you know, how I made it work going back to work. And so I would just really think about, first of all, dumping as much off of your schedule as possible. All those things that you think that you have to do, like just try not doing them for a while and just see what happens, right? And just focus on the one thing of like, how can I make it to work? Also, chances are you might be pumping, right? So support my breastfeeding and come home and be a good mom and partner, right? Like those are your only responsibilities. And then you can figure that other stuff out. Like, how do I make sure I'm eating? Like, let's figure that out later. And so, because it's like we set these bars for ourselves that are so high that makes accomplishing anything really difficult. But also start thinking about what you need from your employer to make it work. So my employer, they put a fridge in my room, in my office for me. I had a private office because I was a lawyer. So you might not have that. So it's like, well, where are the spaces so I can pump? Where are the spaces that I need as a mom? And also what flexibilities are available so that I can still feel like I can be present as a mom and still come back to this job and do great work. And don't be afraid to ask for those things because a lot of people are asking for them. And also don't be afraid to look for another job. That's what I had to do. The first job. So I left that lawyer job for a job that was closer to home. And it was a nightmare that had me commuting all the time. 7 months later, I looked for a different job. Like I really didn't care. It's like, if you don't want to support me as a mom, I know I'm good. I know my skills. I know my credentials. I'll just I'll go somewhere else that values me more. And I did. And that new job allowed me to work from home 3 days a week, and which was great because I was commuting into DC. So you don't have to choose between being in a career that you love, even as an employee, and being a good mom. You can do both. So I just wanted to offer that as well. But I did get a taste for making my own money. And so then over the course of 2 years, it took me to grow my business so that I could replace my lawyer salary. And so I didn't have to take a pay cut. So I didn't have to choose between making great money, doing great work, and being a good mom.
That is an absolutely beautiful thing. All right, mamas, we are at the end of our hour. So let's have all of you share where people can follow you and see more of your work. Let's start with Bethany.
You can find me at Bethany Bayless on Instagram. I'm also at Motherhood and Money Show on Instagram. The podcast that we have is a really great thing that we've been doing for specifically new moms. And since a lot of the new moms have been in a pandemic, we're just having the experiences of being a brand new pandemic mom and kind of just relating to that over at the Motherhood and Money Show podcast. And if you want stickers, you can look me up on Etsy at Bethany Bayless Co. Thank you.
Awesome. Kristin?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. This is so much fun. I really enjoyed it. You can find me on my website, senseandpurpose.com, or on Instagram at Sense and Purpose, and also over on YouTube. And you can just search Sense and Purpose over there and it'll pop up.
Awesome. Tasha?
Yes. So you can find me on Instagram at One Big Happy Life. Also our website, onebighappylife.com, and YouTube, One Big Happy Life.
Love that consistency.
Yes.
Ladies, this was amazing. Thank you so, so much.
Thank you.
Thank
Chelsea.
you. Appreciate it.
Mamas, I loved getting to talk to all of these women and hear their experiences about motherhood and their advice on saving money. It really comes back to sticking to your values, waiting to see what your kid needs, and understanding that this is all a journey. Everything is a phase, and we're going to learn from our experiences and move forward. I like that we got to talk about work as well, because unfortunately in the US, maternity leave isn't a normal part of many women's lives. We talk about 25% of women in the US go back to work within 2 weeks of having their kids. It's a really difficult place to be. And so thinking about how we can save for our own maternity leaves, beef up those emergency funds, and make sure that we have the flexibility we need to really settle into our lives as new moms. Once again, if you want to make sure that you're setting your new baby money plan, that you are thinking about all the things that we even didn't get to cover today, like estate plans and life insurance policies. We have the new Mama Money Plan, which is all set up to do that for you and really walk you through every element of money life. Thank you again to Bethany and Kristin and Tasha who came and joined us on the show, and we'll see you again next week. Bye, Mama.